lot of people are going to fail to learn a language using comprehensible input, and it's not because comprehensible input doesn't work. It's because they're doing something that might technically look like input, but doesn't actually create the conditions in which real acquisition can happen. Comprehensible input is a simple method. You don't need a deep understanding of language learning to get started. In my opinion, there are really only 3 basic understandings you need to have to avoid the pitfalls that keep people from developing real deep fluency using comprehensible input. What's going on, guys? My name's Nick. I'm the creator of Lengualytics and a fluent speaker of the Spanish language, and I got fluent by taking in a massive amount of input in Spanish at a level I understood. Number 1, watch content you understand. And I know that sounds too simple, but I see people all the time on the internet saying things like, well, I did comprehensible input for a year and I only learned 2 words. And to me, that's almost a contradiction in terms, because comprehensible input means comprehensible input. It means input you can comprehend. It does not mean you turn on a podcast in your target language, understood basically nothing, and just waited for your brain to start magically acquiring words. I might call that immersion, but I definitely wouldn't call that comprehensible input. If you want to do this method correctly, you should be trying to consume content that you understand about 80% of. 70% is okay, and 60% is pushing it but still doable. But once you go lower than that, you're no longer doing comprehensible input. At that point, you're mostly just listening to noise. And this is why I don't like the immersion method. One of my first videos on this channel was me talking about why I don't like immersion, why I don't think immersion works. Immersion is a passive activity where you're kind of just hoping that your brain is doing some background work that you're not aware of. Comprehensible input is an active process. You yourself are facilitating your brain's learning by following meaning. The point of comprehensible input is not just that the language is around you. The point is you understand enough of the general meaning to make the missing pieces become coherent. And to make this crystal clear, I'm going to show you an example of how this works in English. I was watching a Shark Tank episode recently on YouTube, and a woman who was giving her pitch was talking about raising money, and she used a word that I actually had never heard before.
So did you raise capital?
So over the last 9 years, I've raised 1.3 million over a bunch of little baby tranches.
I never heard the word tranches before, and apparently tranches is spelled with an A, not an O. It's like tranches. I'm gonna put it on the screen. English. But when she said she raised 1.3 million over a bunch of little baby tranches, I still understood what she was trying to say. To me, it sounded like she was saying she raised the money through a bunch of small bids, or small funding attempts, or small chunks of capital over time. This is how a lot of us still learn words in our native language, and it's how we will learn words in our target language. That's comprehensible input. I already understood most of the message. And because I understood the message, I could use that context to understand a little bit more. In comprehensible input, we call this N+1. You already understand N, and because you understand N, you can reach one level higher. You can understand one new word, one new phrase, one new structure, because they're surrounded by meaning you already understand. And that's not just learning a direct translation, that's deep understanding. Now, not only do I know what tranches is likely to mean, I also know the formality it tends to be used in. What types of conversations does it tend to appear in? And the more I hear it, the more that meaning will slowly become reinforced. That abundance of context is what makes comprehensible input so much more efficient than stuff like flashcards or language learning apps. Along with the word itself, you also get this fire hose of implicit information. We didn't walk around with dictionaries as kids. We heard words thousands of times inside situations we already understood, and little by little, those missing pieces became more and more obvious. So turning on a podcast you don't understand is not comprehensible input. Watching a TV show where you can't follow the plot is not comprehensible input. Sitting there in a fog and hoping your brain somehow figures it out is not the method. Now, if you're curious about how to judge your comprehension, I have a page in the Lengualytics handbook dedicated to helping you figure out how much you're actually understanding. I'm going to put a link to that in the description. If you cannot score at least 60% or higher on that comprehension test, then I would not call what you're doing comprehensible input. Number 2, understand the time commitment. The second most important understanding you can have when you start comprehensible input is understanding how long it takes, how long it really takes to learn a language. A lot of people will tell you that learning a language isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. But it's not even a marathon, it's really an ultra marathon. Deeply acquiring a language takes a long time. A long time.
A long time.
Being able to comfortably and implicitly understand native level content spoken by native speakers at native speed takes more than 1,000 hours in almost any language you can learn. And I think a lot of people hear that and immediately they start looking for a way to get around it. That's why people get pulled into language learning apps, get pulled into flashcards, get pulled into tons of explicit study, because those things feel like shortcuts. It feels like if you can just memorize enough direct translations, consciously learn enough grammar rules, you can just cheat the process and force your comprehension to jump forward. But that's not how our brains work. Our brains are not waiting for the perfect grammar explanation to unlock a new level of fluency. And this is where I think a gym analogy is actually really useful. If your bench press is 135 pounds, nothing is going to take you to 225 pounds overnight. You can watch technique videos. You can read academic studies on muscle growth. But the only thing that actually makes you stronger is progressive overload. If you lift something heavy enough to challenge yourself, but light enough that you can actually move it, then your body adapts. Then you can incrementally add a little bit more weight, and then you can lift that, and then your body adapts again. Progressive overload is the N+1 of exercise science. Comprehensible input works the exact same way. You take in input that's understandable enough for you to follow it, but challenging enough that your brain has to stretch. Then you do that over and over and over again until you've hit 100 hours, 300 hours, 600 hours, 1,000 hours. You just keep doing it and you get better and better and better, just like you get stronger in the gym. If you look at the Dreaming Spanish roadmap, the same roadmap that I base my site on, the numbers are pretty sobering. 150 hours until you can comfortably understand learner content. 300 hours before you can understand a patient native speaker. 600 hours before you can understand a normal speed native speaker. And 1,000 hours before you're truly comfortable with the language. This is a massive time commitment. If you can't accept those numbers, then I personally don't think you can learn a language. Not through language learning apps, not through grammar study, not through flashcards, not through anything. So if you go into comprehensible input thinking you're gonna watch some beginner videos and come out fluent in 50 hours, of course you're going to think that the method doesn't work. But the problem isn't the method. The problem is you went in expecting 50-hour results from a 1,000-hour process. Number 3, watch content you care about. The third thing you need to understand to succeed in comprehensible input is how important it is to care about what you watch. And this matters because comprehensible input hours are no joke. These are hours in which you're taking in input at your level and giving it your full attention. This is not Spanish playing on your laptop while you scroll on your phone. As I've said in the past, comprehensible input is a lot like a game of charades. When you're playing charades, you're leaning forward in your chair. You're watching the person's hands. You're watching their face. You're trying to get any clue you possibly can to help you understand the message they're trying to convey. And even if you're not the person shouting out guesses, you're actively engaged with what you're watching. You're not playing charades if you're in the corner zoned out scrolling on your phone and half paying attention. And this is why comprehensible input is harder than doing grammar exercises. It's harder than doing flashcards. This is my experience. Comprehensible input is the most mentally taxing thing I've ever really had to do when you stretch it out into long sessions. Of course, anybody can listen to Spanish for 10 minutes of their life and be fine with that. But when we're talking about hours and hours and hours every day, it is mentally taxing. It's difficult. Grammar and flashcards feel hard in a really obvious way. They feel like school. They feel like work. But comprehensible input is harder in a deeper way. It asks you to sit inside ambiguity. It asks you to try to follow the meaning even though you don't have all the pieces. It asks you to keep paying attention, to keep caring about it even though you might want to drift off. And even doing 50 hours of that is more than most people can manage, let alone doing 1,000 hours of that. So you can't just throw anything on in your target language and expect your mind to just give it its full attention for hours at a time. You need to watch content you care about. Or at the very least, you need to try to care about the content you're watching. Because comprehensible input isn't about words or structures or grammar. It's about being able to follow a narrative, being able to follow meaning. And meaning can be a lot harder to follow if you really don't give a shit what happened. When someone you care about says something to you, that's gonna matter way more than some random stranger saying the same thing. Think about all the sentences you've probably heard in your life. Millions and millions of sentences. But there's probably only a handful you can actually remember if you really do this thought experiment, if you really think about the sentences, the things people have said to you that stick. There's a handful of them. And they're probably not random things that random people have said to you. They're probably things that were said to you by people you care about in moments that mattered to you. Our brains tend to store what we care about and throw out what we don't. We don't ask our brains to do this, they just do. And that's how we're gonna memorize things in our language learning journey. So when you watch input, you have to ask yourself, am I leading with curiosity? Do I care about what happens next? Am I learning something interesting about culture? Do I want to explain what I just learned to a friend? Do I actually care about what I'm watching? And the best way to do this is to seek out content that you actually really want to watch. And this can be really hard in the beginning, but over time it gets easier and easier. In comprehensible input, you and your mental state are part of the equation. Because it's not your time that's the commodity, it's your attention that's the commodity. And this is common sense. If you pay less attention to something, you're going to remember less of it. If you're bored, if you're anxious, if you're daydreaming while you're trying to watch comprehensible input, that could be your brain telling you, hey, take a break for now, come back later when we have more energy. I don't think I ever had a listening session that was longer than 2 hours when I was a beginner or intermediate. Even now, listening to an audiobook in Spanish still takes a good amount of my conscious energy. Just like listening to a book does in our native language. This isn't only for listening to other languages. In our own native language, if we want to listen to a book, eventually we lose our ability to pay attention because attention costs us. It's not like we just have unlimited energy, unlimited attention. The comprehensible input method is not simply turn on the language and just wait. The method at its core is understanding messages. And the more you care about those messages, the larger the signal to the brain is that says, keep this stuff, it's worth remembering. If one of those 3 basic understandings is missing, the method is going to feel broken. But if all 3 are in place, then the process is going to feel boringly simple. You keep understanding more and more difficult messages, the brain keeps building more and more connections, and eventually the language starts to feel obvious just like it did for me. This is how you learned your native language, and this is exactly how you're going to learn your second language.